So the next one, a fun one for me, less so for others, is color contrast. So as Kate mentioned, systemic barriers can often come up with brand colors, and the fact that we don't often have guides of using specific colors with another, Ryerson or whatever, the Toronto Metropolitan, they just renamed themselves. I think that's it. They actually prevent individuals from using inaccessible color combinations in their content management system, which I think is amazing because it just takes that cognitive workload off of you when you're creating. So each color has what we call a hex code value, or the 6-digit value. So McMaster's maroon is 7A003C. Don't memorize that, please don't. You can access them in the McMaster Digital Brand Guidelines. So I have this linked in this PowerPoint that we'll be sending out. And there are many free tools that you can use to then check color contrast. So if I want to check maroon on white, color review is one of my favorites, just because as a graphic designer, originally, it is a very visual representation, and it's something where I could send the link that it creates of this color contrast to a client and say, if for example, the original color contrast wasn't compliant, I can then send them an additional suggestion with that website where they can see now that it's compliant, and they can check the color combinations and see if it's something they'd like. Color Contrast Analyzer is my go-to if I'm auditing because it has a little dropper. So you're able to pick colors from the screen and you don't need to know their hex code. It creates it for you. So this is, I would say, if you're ever unsure of a color hex code, definitely download that. It's also free. And this image we have on the right, it's just a comparison of a typical rainbow flag and then what that rainbow may look like with for a person with red-green color blindness. So as you can see, it's kind of half and half. Most of the colors look the same. So one big WCAG requirement for color is that we never use color to convey meaning without an additional kind of modality associated with that color. So for example, if we're creating a chart and it's a line graph, we want to make sure that the lines also have symbols associated with them. And it's not just different colored lines in the legend. Pie charts are another great example where they might be different colors. You want to make sure that there's little labels sticking to it so that it's always clear what is referencing to what. And I'm going to quickly go through these because again, we're going to be sending this to you. And I just wanted to create these slides so you have a visual representation of kind of the main brighter world colors on white. So Heritage Maroon is great. It has a contrast of 11 of maroon to white, and it's a pass, AAA pass, so that's the highest level of WCAG. Heritage Gold, please do not use Heritage Gold on white because it's only a contrast of 1.6, so that is a big fail, and we want at least a contrast of 7 for body text for AAA compliance and 4.5 for headers. This is one thing where I always try to aim for AAA compliance because I don't want to be going back and updating documents because I only had it AA compliance. All right, a quick look at what they look like on the black background. Heritage Maroon now is not great. It's only 2.7, but Heritage Gold is great. So this is something, if you have a black background or Heritage Gold with black text, go ahead. That's a perfectly good combination to use. And the other brighter world colors that are lighter, definitely can use them in this context. Another thing we'll quickly mention is non-text contrasts. So if you're creating a diagram, you want the adjacent colors, so colors butting against each other, to at least have a contrast of 3. So these two circles have a contrast of 6.7, which is fine. And these two only have a contrast of 1.9, so not great. One way to get around that, which I like to do, is within your shape format. If I can open it because I have Zoom, we can actually add a line to that circle. So for this case, because I know that my contrast of the gray on white and maroon on white is compliant, I'm going to add a white stroke to that maroon circle, and I'm going to make it a bit bolder. And now this is compliant fully because it's compliant on the background and it's compliant against each other. This one, as we know, it's only 1.6 for our gold. So I'm going to add a black stroke to this circle. And I'm going to make it a bit thicker. And now all of these diagrams are compliant with the background and then also each other. So any questions about colors?
Jess is passion in life.
Well, It definitely, I feel bad because a lot of templates that we have floating around with Master have a lot of color combinations that aren't compliant. So that can be pretty frustrating if you put a bunch of work into something and then you realize that the color combinations of the text aren't compliant. The heritage gray, I think it's darkened in most templates now, but frequently we'll see the heritage gray on the brighter world bright blue, which isn't compliant. So just things I would always check. And if you're not sure, just reference either the slides that I sent you or check on color review.
So Jess, Whitney
Yeah.
put in the chat, asked in the chat, how can you ensure, or how can you tell that the colors are not contrasted? And so
Yeah.
I think Whitney, in the previous slide, just above Jess's examples, she's pointed to 2 free tools. The one is color review and the one is the color contrast analyzer. And so folks, we do not expect you to memorize the WCAG guidelines for color contrast. We expect you to use free tools that you can install on your computer. And literally, like that color contrast analyzer that Jess showed, it's so user friendly. You literally just color drop the color foreground, background, and it will tell you AA compliant, AAA compliant. It's a great tool. Yeah, Jess, you're going to show it in real time?
Yeah, so this is the dropper, so I can just float it around my screen, and let's say I have orange text. So this is not compliant 1.3 for regular text, or it's not compliant 1.4.6. So that's that AAA compliance. These are the WCAG guidelines themselves. It is, however, just compliant for non-text contrast. I would, because of differences in monitors, and individuals may be using older technology, like an older computer, the contrast on their screen is not going to be as good as I have a 4K monitor that I'm looking at right now. So when I'm designing, I typically try to go a bit above that minimum requirement in value. So if it's a 3, I try to go to like at least a 3.5, just so that I know where, regardless of how they're accessing that, it's going to be compliant. So if I wanted this to be darker, I'm going to quickly go over to color review. So let's say while auditing, I find out this color is not compliant and I want my client to pick something that is. I'm going to quickly throw this into color review, and the hex code, there's a foreground option right here. So the thing I love most about color review is that I can click and drag. This is very fall brown now. And if you scroll down, it's going to show you visually what that text looks like on the white background. As we can see here, I'm in that AA for text realm, so 4.5 to 7. If I wanted it to be fully AAA compliant for my text, I just drag it down below that 7 line, and now I'm at 8.3, AAA compliant for text, AAA for headers. So it's just a really nice way to visually play around with content and pick your colors if it's not already a brand color.
If it's not already a brand color.
Yeah, I will frequently use this to darken colors just slightly so that they're a little darker, but still in that color family as well.
Great question.
Okay, so we're going to quickly talk about video and audio, just some considerations. And there's kind of 2 types of videos, the ones that you're sharing and ones that you create our own. So if you're sharing that video, you want to make sure that you're sharing videos that have captions, or a video where you can ask the owner of the video to caption. So if it's on YouTube, typically most YouTube videos are automatically captioned, but if it's not, you could message the YouTube channel owner and ask if they could turn them on, or like similar things. If it's something that's crucial to your course content, maybe you pay for it to be captioned. Yes, and I think they got rid of community, it used to be able to crowdsource captions on YouTube. I think they got rid of that. I don't know why, because that was a great way of also increasing the amount of translations that were available for content. If you own the video, you want to make sure you're uploading it to a platform that allows for automatically generated captions and editing where needed. So Mac Videos, Microsoft Stream, and Echo 360 are 3 great ones where it automatically captions it. Usually it's 90 to 100% caption accuracy. Audio quality will play a part in this, but also It can be a bit, frankly, racist if you have an accent. It will not caption it as well as if you sound like me, where I have a westernized English accent. So that is also something to take into consideration. Vimeo, if you're an enterprise member, it will automatically caption. Unfortunately, it will not for the basic accounts. So that's something to consider, because I know I see Vimeo used quite frequently in health science. So when you're creating video content, we also recommend writing a script if you can, because that helps with automatic captioning. It improves recording efficiency and it can double as a transcript. You can also use YouTube to create captions from that script, which I do frequently. And then you also want to be thinking about including audio descriptions of what's visually taking place on the screen. So throughout this presentation, Kate and I have kind of mentioned where things are on a slide, what that image is of, and that's what we call integrated description. And that's going to remove the need for described video if it's done efficiently. Described video is very expensive and very difficult to do. So if you can, make sure you're describing the video or the images on the screen. And you can also just be repeating the alternative text and using that to describe it visually. That's a great method. If you're circulating only audio information like a podcast, so an MP3, you really want to make sure that you're including a transcript, because that's going to be the only way that some individuals using assistive tech can interact with that content at all. So it's a plain text version of the speech or audio. Any questions about video and audio before we move on?
I might just mention, Jess, for folks who are often dealing with videos that are being posted publicly and they're kind of professional in nature, oh my goodness, if you have a budget, outsource that work. Yes. Editing captions is it is an endeavor. Any instructor who's on the call who was asked to or required to edit transcripts or edit captions as per their course materials know that it's the job of a full-time individual to do that kind of work. So where possible, like borrow if it's already done, and if you have to create your own and if you have budget to do it, there are fantastic services with excellent turnaround times, and they're just going to produce the highest quality. Like 99.9% accuracy is what we aim for anything that's McMaster public facing, like a professional McMaster public facing kind of video asset, just so folks know that if it's uploaded to a McMaster website. Yeah.
Rev.com is really popular. AI Media also does that. It's who we use for our live captionings as well. So there's definitely a lot of resources. And I would say it's worth the time. If you're going to be the person doing it, it's worth paying for someone else to do it faster.
It's a great question, Lynn, about any update of the number of minutes. There's been no update, just so you know, Lynn. The way that Microsoft's updates to accessibility, they've been telling us about a couple of things that were supposed to happen in the last quarter or the quarter before that still haven't been updated for us, including Teams issues with captioning. Yeah. So we can certainly actually, what we could do if it's useful is add this to every month we meet with Microsoft. There's a group of folks across campus that meet with Microsoft, and this could be actually a great little question for them. And it's an excellent point. Although I will say, Lynn, if you're running any of your courses and or lectures through Teams, you should be able to download the transcript from Microsoft Teams. So if that's at all a possibility, it's pretty accurate. Like it's as accurate as Zoom materials, in my opinion. Yeah, we will certainly add this to the agenda. There's another question coming in from another community member who wants to talk to Microsoft. And good point. Some folks find Teams a really great environment for their teaching and learning purposes, and other folks do not find it conducive to a good teaching and learning experience. So it's a fair point that it might not
I would
work
upload to Mac Video then, if your goal is to get that transcription. We also will be sending out in the Pressbook, there's a tool to convert caption files to transcript files. So it removes all of that extra information like timings and creates a plain text file. So we will send that forward, but Mac Video doesn't have a limit. And you can share videos unlisted like with YouTube. So that's another great option because Stream's sharing permissions frustrate me frequently. Alrighty, so we're going to quickly go over kind of a check-in on basic social media posts. We're going to put in quotes, a bad example. And it's just an example of how I used to format my social media posts. We have all of our kind of links embedded, our hashtags are throughout, and we don't have camel case being used. So it's not the best interaction of if someone's using assistive technology. I don't know if we did. No, there's no alternative text. I don't know if that was on purpose or not, Kate. But if there isn't an alternative text,
There used to be.
Yeah,
There used to be.
we have copied this from another presentation. So that might be why. But yeah, that can also impede, again, having that equitable experience, same time, and same eating of information. It's not the word I wanted, but it's as close as consuming of information as possible. So one way to make this better is to have all our text at the front. We've removed the tag of Kate at the front. So now it's just Kate's demonstrating what a vertical mouse looks like to promote accessible technologies for the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. And now we have all our hashtags at the bottom. We have the acronym one, the IDPWD 2020, and then also International Day of Persons with Disabilities 2020. So having both is beneficial. And then we've tagged Kate right at the end because that would be a link. Any questions about how we formatted that? And go ahead, Kate.
I would say also, if folks want to know, a quick alt text description would just be person using a vertical mouse.
Yeah.
Like a really simple, in this case, would just be a
Yeah.
very, very simple description.
They don't have to be complicated. We also recommend, if it's a photo where the type of image doesn't matter, to not say a photo of, because that gets a bit redundant. If it's a portrait of someone, where that's, I would say you could say a portrait of somebody, but you don't always need to say a photo or an image of. You can just say this, like a person using a vertical mouse. Now, our last example that we're going to quickly talk about today, this is a social media story. And as I mentioned, stories are very hard to make accessible, but this is a great example of brand colors used poorly. We have the bright pink and bright orange of Dunkin' Donuts fries, and it's a Dunkin' Donuts fries with their donut fries. Underneath it says, you don't have to choose anymore, try donut fries, with the pink on the orange, and then a poll where it says pick donuts or fries. So the brand colors that they've used, the orange on pink or the pink on orange, is only 1.3 to 1. So it's very poor. I find it very hard to read. It strains my eyes. Don't love it. Design could have been much better in that case. We also want to be cognizant in social media context of where we're putting buttons. So is it operable? This is where the poor principles come into play. The buttons could be a little higher in this case, because we're going to bump into the user interface or the UI of Instagram. That share button, it's pretty close. And if you have a mobility impairment or low vision or cognitive disabilities, it also becomes a bit more difficult to navigate. You also could place a more better question, because it says you don't have to choose, but we want you to pick donuts or fries. So it's a little confusing in how they've structured this anyways. And if there is audio, as we mentioned, we want to make sure that there are captions included. And I feel like you now can't. Can you see my bar at the bottom now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is a great example.
Max. There we go. I've moved it. So accompanying audio should be captioned. And if we can't tell, I don't like Apple products, but I worked on one. So yeah, I found this while browsing Instagram stories, and I thought it was quite funny how not accessible it was. So it's an example we use quite frequently because it's a cute little story, but there are things that could be done to make sure that it's accessible for everybody interacting with it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So, folks, we had scheduled, an approximate 20 to 25 minute of Q&A, but I think integrating the Q&A into the presentation is always a little bit more responsive for this type of training or workshop. With that being said, I think Whitney needs 5 minutes to wrap us up. So if folks have questions or comments, we have still about 10 minutes or 8 minutes or so. And just encourage you to unmute or chat or pop stuff in the chat, because we are all yours until 7 o'clock. I feel like we're all a little bit tired, and that's a-okay. So if we're all just a little bit tired, it's totally fine to not have a Q&A. Great. So glad that you found it informative. We also realize that it's a lot of information. So sometimes when you're in that receptive mode and you're thinking, processing, it's more difficult to formulate questions, comments. And so in the next iteration of the 201 version of this presentation, Jess and I are going to be thinking through, based on previous workshops that we've conducted, how to make it a little bit more, here's the skill, here's how you can practice it, and here's how you would audit it in sort of a live context. I think it'll be easier for folks to grasp onto the context if we're bringing up more examples of bad media and then showing you how we would work through problem solving the bad media, in particular documents. Documents are so great to run through in an interactive way, because we can show you in Word in live time how to use the checkers, how to use the navigation guides and panes, and then all the little techniques kind of combined together in meaningful context. Other than, it's sometimes hard to put all the pieces together when they're being displayed all over the place. And so we'll hopefully bring all those pieces together in the next session for those who will be joining us. And I wonder, Whitney, is there anything else that folks need to know before we head off into the sunset?
I just want to say thank you to Kate and to Jessica for joining us this evening and for presenting all their information. It was certainly informative, and I know that we'll be changing a few things about how we do things in faculty affairs. So I hope that everyone else is able to implement some of the tips and tricks that Kate and Jessica have presented. We do ask that individuals complete an evaluation form for those that were able to stay for the end. And I believe Kate and Jessica both acknowledged that they will be sharing their presentation as well. So we'll be sending that out in the next day or so, along with a copy of the evaluation form for those that aren't able to fill it out tonight. And then once the recording is available through McMaster Program for Faculty Development, we'll be sharing that link out as well. So thanks again to Kate and to Jessica for facilitating this evening. Special thanks to Dr. Brenda Verkelian, who unfortunately had to leave earlier this evening, but for doing our introductions. And special thanks to our Scientific Planning Committee of the EDI and Indigenous Health Speaker Series for helping to put everything together. And this was a wonderful way to kick off this the Spring 2022 series, and certainly follow at FHS_FAC Affairs for more information on registration for the upcoming session.
Great.
Yeah, perfect. So thank you so much. And certainly we'll stick around for a few minutes if anyone has any last minute questions. But thank you so much for everyone for joining, and we look forward to seeing you at future sessions.